Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the South Derbyshire series, a district of Derbyshire which stretches from Leicestershire to Staffordshire, containing 50 civil parishes. Here's one of them for you. Welcome back to South Derbyshire again, folks, to a tiny village, but a parish that has a lot to talk about. There's a big car factory within the boundaries of this one, and also an old hospital too, the grounds of which have now been built over. This is the main village though, and believe me, this is small compared to the rest of the things we'll be talking about in this episode. Welcome to the beautiful Burnaston. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Burnaston, Brunwulf's farm. This week in South Derbyshire, we're taking on Burnaston, and this one's got way more than you might initially think. Burnaston Parish covers an immense amount of land when compared to the small rural village that sits at its centre. In that village there are some pretty houses and cottages and all that kind of stuff, but it's what's on the outskirts that's of real interest. Burnaston gave its name to the now defunct Derby Airport. You may remember that from a couple of episodes ago. Derby Airfield is in Egginton Parish, which replaced it. Built on the site of the airport is a massive factory owned by the Japanese car giant Toyota. The plant is so big, it's hard to miss. We'll delve into the history of that and of the airport in this episode. Burnaston also covers part of Mickleover, a suburb of Derby. The part in question, to the untrained eye, looks like a brand new estate, with not a lot to speak of. However, at its centre there's at least two buildings that give away its former use. It was the site of Pastures Hospital, a medical facility of the kind we have seen before, but as of yet not in Derbyshire. So, from Japanese cars to old hospitals and everything else in between, it's a varied one. Come with me around another parish on the edge of Derby to learn a bit more about life this close to the city. Let's start this one with the biggest and most well-known landmark in Burnaston Parish, the Toyota factory. This roundabout we're on is where the A38 crosses the A50. It's a huge interchange between two major UK roads. The roundabout has been known as Toyota Island ever since the factory was built. Access to the factory is by this way and this way only. Even though it backs onto Green Lane in Burnaston Village, there's no access via that road. The Toyota plant is one of several built by the Japanese car makers as part of measures to avoid expenses such as import duties and shipping costs. It took a while to build, 3 years in fact. Following the decision by Toyota during the second half of the 1980s to build a new factory in Europe, the plant finally opened its doors just before Christmas in 1992. However, there was also a formal opening ceremony in 1993 when our current King Charles III, then the Prince of Wales, attended to declare it officially operational. This is the UK's main Toyota plant, but there is another, an engine factory located in Deeside, North Wales. The factory's first car was a charcoal Carina E, which rolled off the production line on the first day of operation. That car is now preserved in the British Motor Museum. Toyota occupies the site of the former Derby Airport. That was a grass airfield that opened in 1938 as the municipal airport for Derby. During World War II, it was used for military training purposes, reverting after to use by airlines. These included Derby Aviation, which later became Derby Airways, and then British Midland Airways. Derby was the main airport for the Midlands until 1965, when the newly reconstructed East Midlands Airport opened across the county border in Leicestershire. Private flying from Burnaston continued until 1989, when the site was taken over by Toyota. Some of Burnaston village also had to make way for the plant too, but we'll talk more about that when we hit the village itself. Now, to get to the village we have to use the A38. As we mentioned in the Egginton episode, this road follows the route of the Roman Ricknield Street, and it's absolutely dead straight between Derby and Burton-on-Trent. We last talked about this particular Roman road at length when we covered the parishes close to Chesterfield. It ran for a really long way. Its route began at the Fosway in Bourton-on-the-Water in Gloucestershire and ended at Templeborough near Rotherham in South Yorkshire. It was an important route by all accounts. As the A38 it still is today. In fact, its route is even longer than the Roman road. The A38 runs from Bodmin in Cornwall to Mansfield. It's 292 miles long, making it the longest two-digit A road in England. It was formerly known as the Leeds to Exeter Trunk Road, but that's when its description also included the A61. Before the opening of the M5, the A38 formed the main holiday route from the Midlands to the southwest. Burnaston village is, in the grand scheme of things here, the smallest part of the parish. It occupies less land than the Toyota factory, and most of the parish population don't even live in it. I'll explain why later. It's a simple enough village. Burnaston is, generally speaking, one long lane with a few cul-de-sacs off to either side. There's also a second, less significant area of housing off the A516. Burnaston was believed to have been founded at the same time as Etwall and Bearwoodcote by the Angles and the Saxons, who sailed up the River Trent and settled in the area. Although there's no definite timescale, it's believed Burnaston dates back to between 450 and 550 AD. That makes it one of the oldest settlements in Derbyshire. By the time of the Norman conquest in 1066, the area was probably the most settled and prosperous in the county, with rich arable farmland. Landmarks here are few, but there is a village hall. This was originally a mission room and was given to the village by a local farmer, a man by the name of Stone. The hall is mainly used today for parish meetings and private functions, as well as by the Burnaston Women's Institute. It is, of course, the ideal place for one of these, a parish notice board, so let's mark another South Derbyshire location off that list, which is growing ever shorter. Next to the board you'll find this amazing map of the village. This shows every single house, and it's handy because most of them have names. Before the onset of World War II, Burnaston was mostly a farming community, and the majority of the population stayed local for work. Even today, the village is without pavements or street lighting, which means it still feels like the rural community it always has been. And that's good. Burnaston has never had a great deal of amenities, but there was a shop with an amazing story behind it. Until shortly after World War II, the only shop here was located within a small cottage at the corner of Tinderbox Lane. It was run for many years by a little old lady who used to sit behind the counter in candlelight, waiting for her customers. Legend has it, the name Tinderbox Lane was derived from locals picking up flint in the area to fill their tinderboxes. Now it's time to head down Tinderbox Lane because it turns into a footpath, which we'll follow for a while. Well, it was raining quite heavily last night, so the ground is quite saturated at the moment, but even so, it's worth the walk here because you've got this path to yourself basically. This is part of Burnaston I imagine that people don't normally see. This path runs and turns back towards the road to Etwall in a moment. So this view will soon disappear, but I'm just making the most of it while I'm here. There's no cars around. I can hear a road in the background, but of course all I've really got is the sound of bird song, which is soundtracking my route around Burnaston this morning. It's lovely, isn't it? It's fantastic. This weather hopefully will hold out for the rest of the day. Now we're on Etwall Lane, where there's some massive houses. Burnaston House, once the biggest house in the village, was the home of the Every family of Egginton. That no longer stands. It had to be demolished to make way for part of the Toyota factory in 1990. High Sheriff of Derbyshire Ashton Nicholas Every Mosley once lived in it. It later became the social centre for Derby Aero Club and Derby Aviation in the 1940s. Now, a lady by the name of Miss Crew once lived at the Old Hall. That's this house here. She had a lending library of over 500 volumes, often lent to parishioners. As Etwall Lane becomes Main Street again, we pass a phone box. I guess this marks the centre of the village these days. Originally, Burnaston had been a small collection of farms and cottages centred around a village green, which was known as the Bank. This disappeared in the 1960s when the cottages around it were demolished. They were thatched and timbered, contained old fireplaces and rickety stairs that led up to rooms where the ceiling was the roof of the entire building. How times change, but it's good to see Burnaston hasn't succumbed to major new development. Well, at least not here. So in terms of cul-de-sacs, you'll have gathered there's not very many. This is one of them, Walnut Close, which is on the way back towards the car. Now, if you look at the population figures of Burnaston, you might think it looks a little bit too much for the size of the village we've just walked around. Well, that's because most of the people that live in Burnaston Parish actually don't live within the village. They live on an estate that's been built on the grounds of an old hospital, and that is where we're heading next. Before we get to the estate, we have to first pass through an often forgotten part of Burnaston. The reason for that is because it's off the A516 and most traffic that uses this road just sails on past. However, there are more houses and businesses down Grassy Lane, and if you know how, you can even walk between the main village and this little spur via a public footpath. Business-wise, Burnaston Garage is located here. As well as being a fully equipped MOT station, Burnaston Garage also sells a range of used cars. I wonder how many Toyotas made at the factory have been through their hands before now. Most people that stop here do so for fuel. This area also contains Etwall services, which should not be confused with the service area at the junction of the A38 and A50 off Toyota Island. That would be Derby and Burton services, but it too often gets referred to as Etwall. With not much more to see here, I made my way out of the forecourt and on to the housing estate. So this is the estate in question, and it can be found just to the east of the village off the A516. Even though it's within the boundaries of Burnaston, this estate is considered to be part of the Derby suburb of Mickleover. The estate is built on part of the site of the former Pastures Hospital. The main buildings of the former health facility still stand, and they've now become apartments. We'll see them shortly. The hospital opened in August 1851, with additional wards created twice in 1895 and 1905. It became the Derbyshire County Mental Hospital in 1918 and joined the NHS as Pastures Hospital in 1948. After the introduction of care in the community in the early 1980s, the hospital went into a period of decline and closed in 1994. Shall we have a look at the buildings? I think that's a good idea. Okay, so we are going to take a little stroll around this area because there are plenty of things to see. Of course, the hospital is the biggest and most prominent of those landmarks, and that can be seen just here. If I turn the camera slightly, there it is. There is the building in question. We'll talk a bit about that, and we'll also talk about a church which is still standing too. There's also a football club and even a school in this part of Burnaston. So this is the hospital, and it now forms part of Dewsbury Court, which is a block of apartments. It's named after the man who designed the main building, Henry Dewsbury. He did so in the Jacobean style using a corridor layout. Henry was a relative of the Dewsbury family that achieved fame thanks to Royal Crown Derby, believed to be the oldest or second oldest English porcelain manufacturer remaining in existence today. Dewsbury was the borough architect for Derby from 1841 until 1854. As well as the hospital, he also designed Derby Guildhall and several structures at the Arboretum. Now, as well as the hospital, this area also has some other features we need to mention. There's a football club down there. That pitch belongs to Mickleover Country Park FC, who play in the Burton and District Sunday League. They should not be confused with Mickleover Sports, the other local team. There's also a church in this area too. Grade 2 listed, this was associated with the hospital. It never had a dedication and was simply known as the hospital's trustees' church. A private building, it was constructed in 1870 of rock-faced sandstone with some additional sandstone dressings. The church comprises a nave with transepts, a lower chancel, a northwest tower and a vestry. Inside, some pews are original, but most of the furniture is now missing. Despite the hospital's site having been redeveloped for new housing in the early 2000s, there are a few clues to its former use. A few examples of the old street lighting still remain in place. I found a great website showing some of those, and it's linked below. To finish with, we're taking a drive to the north of the estate to find Highgrange School. Located off Hospital Lane, Highgrange is a specialist school for young people aged between 5 and 19 who are on the autism spectrum. For those aged under 15, Highgrange is set up like a typical primary school would be. This allows for a nurturing approach to help children settle and grow into the school. Students later have the opportunity to access a secondary-style curriculum that offers things like BTECs, GCSEs and A-levels. Sports facilities include a large gymnasium, a fitness suite and even an indoor swimming pool. And that's it! We are around another parish on the outskirts of Derby, and I don't know about you, but I enjoyed that one. On to the next. See you later. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.